"They are deceiving you," said the street girl to the millionaire, pointing at his children. "If this story interests you, subscribe to our channel and tell us what city you're watching from. Let's begin." Robert Miller never thought that the quietest part of his mansion could become the eye of the loudest storm of his life. President of one of the largest laboratory networks in the United States, his name was associated with credibility, innovation, and excellence. To the press and investors, he was a symbol of stability and pragmatism. To his employees, a respected leader. But within the cold walls of his home in Charleston, South Carolina, he was just a broken man trying to cope with the weight of what he couldn't control. His 3 children, 9-year-old triplets who, after an accident in the pool of their beach house on Isle of Palms, became dependent on wheelchairs, monitors, and physical therapy sessions that promised little and delivered even less. The tragedy had consumed the family's vital energy. Eleanor, his wife, couldn't withstand the emotional pressure and, a few months after the incident, left for the Appalachian Mountains of North Carolina. Claiming she needed to regain her balance away from it all, she never returned. Robert took on the sole care of the children, now under the supervision of Mrs. Jenkins, a longtime housekeeper, and a battalion of specialists who transformed one of the house's floors into a domestic clinical wing. Still, even with all the structure, the boys seemed emotionally more distant each day, enveloped by an apathy that nothing could penetrate. On the morning everything changed, Robert was driving alone through downtown Charleston, South Carolina. It was an unusual route for him, but he had decided to do something he hadn't done in a long time: personally deliver documents to the company headquarters. Traffic was slow. The cloudy sky seemed to reflect exactly what was happening inside him. Stopped at a red light on Waterfront Drive, he saw a slender girl approach with ill-kept clothes and bare feet. She extended her hand to ask for something, but as he prepared to ignore her, she simply spoke. She didn't shout, didn't ask for money, didn't whine. She just said with strange firmness, "They're deceiving you." The phrase hit him like a punch to the stomach. Robert found himself without reaction, just watching that girl standing there, staring at him with firm, almost adult eyes. Something in her tone prevented him from simply dismissing her. Instead, he pulled over and asked her to get in. There was no logic to the decision, just a strange, almost primitive instinct that moved him. "What's your name?" he asked, observing in the rearview mirror the girl settling into the back seat. "Sunny, but everyone just calls me Sunny," she replied with disconcerting naturalness. "And your parents?" "I don't have them anymore. Fire in the Hollows community. It's been almost a year." Robert swallowed hard. He wasn't sure what to do with that information, or with the girl for that matter. "And how do you survive?" "Sometimes I stay with my Aunt Martha, when she's not drinking too much. Other times I just stay around. I have my spots. People at the public market know me. They give me food. I don't go hungry." "And why did you say that to me? That they're deceiving me?" Sunny tucked her curly hair behind her ear and sighed, as if the answer were obvious. "Because they are. I feel things, you know. My grandmother called it a gift. When I looked at you stopped in that expensive car, I saw a dark cloud around you, and 3 little points of light being suffocated by a big lie. I can't explain it better." Robert was silent. At any other time in his life, he would have left that girl at the nearest police station or shelter, but there was something about her, the same thing that made him stop the car, perhaps, that resonated within him, as if she knew something he himself couldn't see. "Are you hungry?" he finally asked. Sunny nodded. "Do you want to eat something at my house? I can give you clean clothes too. Afterwards we'll decide what to do." "You don't need to. Be afraid of me," she said. "I'm not one of those kids who steal things. I just want to help." "Help with what exactly?" "With your children, the 3 sad boys." Robert braked abruptly, startled by the precision of those words. How did she know? He wasn't wearing a wedding ring, had no pictures in the car, hadn't said anything about children. The girl just smiled, understanding. "I told you, I feel things." The rest of the drive was silent. Upon arriving at the mansion in Isle of Palms, Mrs. Jenkins greeted them with a look of astonishment. She looked at the girl as if she were an exotic animal Robert had brought home. Mrs. Jenkins, this is Sunny. She's going to take a bath, eat something and stay with us for now. The housekeeper opened her mouth to protest, but Robert's firm expression stopped her. It had been a long time since he had made a decision that didn't involve consulting doctors or administrators. That sudden firmness was a welcome novelty. "Have the boys had breakfast yet?" he asked. "Yes, sir. They're in the physical therapy room with Dr. Rachel. Morning session today, remember?" Robert nodded. He had cancelled an important meeting to be present at that session, but ended up getting distracted by urgent documents, another failure for his collection of absences. "Please take Sunny to the guest room, provide clothes, I think Eleanor's can be adjusted, and then bring her down to the kitchen. I'll go see the boys." As he climbed the stairs towards the adapted wing, Robert wondered what on earth he was doing. Bringing a stranger home, trusting the mystical words of a street child. It was the kind of behavior his brother and partner Arthur would classify as the beginning of a nervous breakdown. Maybe it was. Maybe it was just the desperation of a father who no longer knew what to do to bring his children back. Upon entering the physical therapy room, he found Gabriel, Matthew, and Luke lying on parallel stretchers, while the physical therapist worked on Luke's legs. The other two stared fixedly at the ceiling, with that empty expression that tormented him so much. "Good morning, boys," Robert said with a forced smile. "Good morning, Dad," they replied in unison without much enthusiasm. Dr. Rachel gave him a positive sign. "Luke is responding well today. We had some involuntary spasms, which is a great sign for neurological recovery." Robert nodded without showing how much those small hopes tore him apart. He had heard that before, from other specialists, small signs that led nowhere. A path of crumbs lost in the dark forest of his children's condition. "Dad," called Gabriel, the oldest of the three by exactly 2 minutes. "Who's the girl who came with you?" Robert frowned. How could Gabriel know? The physical therapy room window overlooked the back of the house, not the entrance. "How do you know I brought someone?" Gabriel looked away, suddenly, uncomfortable. I heard the car arrive, and then different voices. From the closed window on the second floor, you heard voices on the ground floor?" The suspicion in Robert's voice was evident. "Leave him alone, Dad," Matthew intervened. "We were just curious." Robert took a deep breath. He didn't want to create tension so early. "It's a girl named Sunny. She is going through difficulties and will stay with us for a few days. I thought you might like the company." The three exchanged quick glances, a silent code Robert had never been able to decipher. It was as if they communicated telepathically, something common among twins and triplets, according to the doctors. But there was something more there, a complicity that went beyond the natural bond between siblings. "Is she our age?" asked Luke, his voice suddenly animated. "A little older, she's 12. Can she play with us later?" It was the first time in months Robert had seen that sparkle in his children's eyes. "Of course, if you want to, and Dr. Rachel allows it." "The boys need to rest after the session," the physical therapist reminded him. "But a short visit wouldn't hurt." When the session ended, Robert helped transfer the boys to their wheelchairs. He couldn't help but notice how Gabriel seemed less dependent today, almost as if he was controlling the impulse to help himself. Perhaps it was just his imagination, fueled by Sunny's enigmatic words. They all went down for lunch, using the elevator Robert had installed after the accident. In the large kitchen, they found Sunny sitting at the table, now clean and wearing a floral dress that had belonged to Eleanor. Mrs. Jenkins prepared lunch with a still suspicious expression. "Boys, this is Sunny," Robert introduced. The girls smiled at the three, but not with the pity people usually showed. It was a sincere smile as equals, and to Robert's surprise, the three smiled back. "You have cool rooms," she commented. "Mrs. Jenkins showed me around the house." "Did you see our games?" Matthew asked, enthusiastic. "I did. I have some good tricks in Mario Kart, you know." And so, naturally, a conversation began. Sunny spoke to the boys as if she had known them for years, without any embarrassment about their condition. She talked about games, about places in Charleston she liked, about a whale she once saw swimming at, Folly Beach. The boys listened fascinated, asking questions, laughing at her stories. Robert watched this with a mixture of relief and suspicion. On one hand, it was wonderful to see his children reacting, connecting with someone. On the other hand, there was something disturbing about the ease with which Sunny had entered their lives, as if she already knew all the family's secrets. After lunch, while the boys rested in their rooms and Sunny explored the garden, Robert received a call from his brother. "Have you heard about the new mascot you've acquired?" Arthur's voice sounded laden with irony. "How did you find out about this?" Robert felt a chill. It had happened just a few hours ago. "Robert, you are the president of a company with over 3,000 employees. Do you really think you can pick up a street girl without anyone noticing?" Your driver called the head of security, worried. "She's not a mascot, she's just a child going through difficulties. A child who appeared out of nowhere and is now in your house with access to your children and all your assets. Did you even verify her story? Contact Child Protective Services, the police?" Robert ran, a hand over his face, tired. Arthur had always been the pragmatic one of the duo. While he, Robert, focused on research and development, on the company's vision, Arthur handled operations, numbers, security. It was a good business arrangement, but it made personal relationships exhausting. "I'll handle it, Arthur, don't worry. It's not about me worrying. It's about you behaving erratically since, well, you know." The accident. Arthur never mentioned it directly, nor Eleanor and her abandonment. It was as if he avoided touching his brother's wounds. "I'm fine. The boys are fine. Sunny will only stay a few days, until I find a suitable place for her. Just be careful. You know how the press loves a scandal involving people like us. Millionaire businessman adopts street child. They'll speculate about your motivations. They'll turn a gesture of kindness into something sordid." After hanging up, Robert stood watching from his office window as Sunny examined the garden flowers. There was a delicacy in her movements, a reverence for life that contrasted with the hardship she had certainly faced. Perhaps Arthur was right. Perhaps he was being reckless, but something inside him insisted that this girl had a purpose in their lives. The day passed with a tranquility long absent from the mansion. After resting, the boys spent hours talking with Sunny, showing her their games, telling stories. Robert worked in his office, but every half hour he found an excuse to pass through the living room and observe them. He was amazed by the change. The three, always so apathetic, now laughed and spoke with animation. That night, when he put them to bed, a ritual he maintained despite his children's age and their protests that they were big boys now, he noticed something different in the air, a lightness, an expectation. "Dad," Luke called as Robert was about to leave the room, "can Sunny stay longer? Not just a few days." Robert hesitated. "We'll see how things go, son. She probably has family looking for her." She said she doesn't have anyone, just an aunt who drinks too much. Even so, there are procedures. Child Protective Services needs to be informed. The three exchanged those knowing glances again. "She's cool," Gabriel insisted, "and she understands us." "Understands how?" "Just understands." Robert turned off the light, but left the door ajar, as he always did. In the hallway, he stopped, hearing a movement coming from the guest room. He approached silently and saw Sunny sitting on the floor in a meditative position, eyes closed, murmuring something he couldn't understand. The scene disturbed him, but not as much as the shiver he felt when he realized she knew she was being watched. Without opening her eyes, she said, "They're keeping a secret too heavy for children, Mr. Miller. That's why they can't get better." "What secret?" he asked, entering the room. "I can't say. They need to trust me first, and they need to believe you won't be angry." "Why would I be angry?" Sunny finally opened her eyes, and Robert was surprised by the depth of that gaze. "Because sometimes the truth hurts more than the lie we tell ourselves." That night, Robert barely slept. Sunny's words haunted him. What secret could his children be hiding? What could be so terrible as to keep them trapped in that condition? His rational mind said it was absurd, that the paralysis was real, documented, the result of physical injuries. But a part of him, the same part that had made him stop the car that morning, whispered that maybe, just maybe, there was something more. Around 3 in the morning, he got up to get a glass of water. Passing through the hallway leading to the boys' rooms, he noticed a subtle movement through the crack in Gabriel's door. He stopped, holding his breath. The bedside lamp was on, casting soft shadows on the walls. And there, in the middle of the room, he saw something that made his heart almost stop. Gabriel standing, leaning on the dresser, taking 2 shaky steps before quickly returning to bed. Robert recoiled, stunned, the glass almost slipping from his hand. Could it be possible? Or was he so desperate for a miracle that he had started hallucinating? He stood there, paralyzed by doubt, while inside the room, Gabriel adjusted his covers as if nothing had happened. It was then that he felt a presence behind him. He turned and found Sunny, standing in the dark hallway, only her silhouette visible against the faint moonlight entering through the window. "Now you know," she said simply. "The question is, what will you do about it?" Robert had no answer. For the first time in many years, the man who commanded an empire had no idea what his next step would be. The next morning, Robert woke with a strange feeling, as if he were living in 2 parallel realities. There was the reality of medical reports, expensive treatments, renowned specialists who had diagnosed his children, and now this other reality emerged, nebulous and unsettling, suggested by a girl who had appeared out of nowhere and by a nocturnal scene that might have been just a product of his exhausted mind. During breakfast, he watched his 3 sons intently. They were more talkative than usual, asking Sunny about her life, about the places she knew in Charleston. The girl answered naturally, as if she had always been part of that scene. At one point, as she spoke about the public market and the boats that went out fishing at dawn, her eyes met Robert's. For an instant, that gaze, too mature, contrasted with the light story she was telling, as if sending a silent message. "I know what you saw. We need to talk," Robert said when they were alone in the kitchen after Mrs. Jenkins had taken the boys for their morning session with the occupational therapist. Sunny nodded as if she had expected it. "About what I saw last night," he began, unsure how to formulate that impossible question. "Gabriel walking," she completed directly. "It wasn't a hallucination, nor a coincidence." Robert felt his stomach drop. Part of him wanted her to deny it, to offer a rational explanation. The other part, however, longed for confirmation of what his heart already suspected. How do you know all this? About my children? About what happened?" Sunny shrugged, a strangely adult gesture for her 12 years. "I told you, I feel things. My grandmother said it's a gift passed down through generations in the women of my family. Not all of them have it, but I do. And what do you feel about my children? That they're not sick the way everyone thinks. They're sick in another way. Inside, carrying something too heavy." Robert shook his head, trying to organize his thoughts. "Are you suggesting they can walk, that they're faking?" "It's not exactly faking. It's more complicated." Sunny bit her lip, searching for words. "It's like they made a promise to someone, or a pact among themselves. Something so strong that the body obeys even when the mind knows it doesn't. Have to." "That doesn't make sense," Robert retorted, his voice harsher than he intended. "There are reports, exams, spinal cord injuries that explain the paralysis. Do you believe the papers more than what you saw with your own eyes?" The question hung in the air, challenging. Robert had no answer for it. "What do you suggest, then? That I confront my children? That I tell them I know they're lying?" Sunny's eyes widened, alarmed. "No, that will only make them shut down more. They're afraid. Terribly afraid." "Afraid of what?" "I don't know yet. They don't fully trust me. I need more time." Robert rubbed his face, confused and tired. Part of him wanted to expel that girl, to erase the doubts she had planted, to return to the comfortable certainty of known tragedy, instead of delving into this disturbing mystery. But he couldn't ignore what he had seen, nor the change in his children since Sunny's arrival. "How long?" "I don't know. A few days, maybe a few weeks." Robert sighed. "I'll contact Child Protective Services today. Tell them I found you and that you're temporarily under my care. That will give us a little legal time." Sunny nodded, a gentle smile on her lips. "Thank you, I promise you won't regret it." That afternoon, while the boys rested and Sunny explored the mansion's library, Robert received an unexpected visit. Arthur arrived without warning, accompanied by a man in a suit who introduced himself as Dr. Maurice Evans, a psychiatrist specializing in family trauma. "What does this mean?" Robert asked, irritated by the intrusion. "A fraternal intervention," Arthur replied with false lightness. "I'm worried about you, brother, we all are." "Who is we all, exactly?" "The board of directors, your friends, me. Since the accident, you've isolated yourself, and now this, bringing a stranger into your house." "The girl has a name, Arthur, and she's not harming anyone." "Yet," his brother pointed out, "we know nothing about her true intentions. She's 12 years old enough to be used by ill-intentioned adults. Have you thought she might be part of a scheme to extort you later, or worse?" Robert laughed, incredulous. "So that's it? You think I'm the victim of an elaborate scam orchestrated by a street child?" Dr. Maurice intervened with a soft, professional voice. "Mr. Miller, your brother is just concerned about your psychological well-being. After traumas like what your family has experienced, it's not uncommon for us to seek distractions, ways to transfer our attention and our pain." "And you think the girl is a distraction? A form of compensation?" "I cannot make that diagnosis without a proper evaluation, but I would like to talk to you, and if possible, meet the child." Robert felt anger rising. Arthur had always done this, made decisions for him, taken control when he thought his brother was faltering. In the past, he had accepted this dynamic because deep down he trusted his brother's judgment. But now, there was something different, an intuitive certainty that he needed to protect Sunny, that she was truly there to help. "It won't happen today," he said firmly. "I appreciate the concern, but I am perfectly sane. The girl will stay until Child Protective Services determines the best course of action for her case. If you want to help, you can contact the company's social assistants and see if there are family members who can properly receive her." Arthur and the doctor exchanged worried glances. "Robert," his brother insisted, "you're putting your reputation and the company's at risk. Have you thought about the rumors that might arise? A single man sheltering an unknown preteen—" "Enough!" Robert raised his voice, surprising himself. "I will not allow you to turn an act of human decency into something sordid. The girl stays, and the matter is closed." When the two finally left, Robert realized he was trembling. It had been years since he had confronted his brother that way. It was as if a dormant force within him was awakening, the same one that had made him stop the car and welcome Sunny. As he turned, he found the girl standing in the hallway watching him. "Your brother doesn't like me," she stated. "He doesn't know you." "That's not it. He's afraid of what I might do, what I might reveal." Robert frowned. "What do you mean by that?" Sunny didn't answer. Instead, she asked a question that caught him by surprise. "Was your brother present on the day of the accident?" The question hit Robert like lightning. Arthur had indeed been there. It was he who had called the ambulance, who had coordinated the rescue, while Robert, in shock, held his unconscious children. But what did that have to do with the current situation? He organized everything while I couldn't react. Sunny nodded as if confirming something to herself. "I will help your children, Mr. Miller. I promise. But you will also need to be strong. Very strong." That evening, after dinner, something unusual happened. The boys asked to do what they called a meditation session with Sunny. The girl explained that they were breathing and visualization exercises her grandmother had taught her. "It helps to clear the energy," she said simply. Robert allowed it, watching from afar as she sat on the living room floor with the three around, her in their wheelchairs. With a serene voice, she guided them in rhythmic breathing, asking them to imagine a golden light entering through the top of their heads and descending through their entire bodies, cleansing everything that is dark or stuck. What impressed Robert most was the seriousness with which his children followed the instructions. They, who usually complained about all conventional therapies, now participated focused, absorbed. With their eyes closed, breathing deeply, they seemed in a trance. Sunny also had her eyes closed, but at one point she opened them and looked directly at Robert. In that gaze there was a silent communication, a plea for trust. In the following nights, Robert discreetly monitored his children's rooms. He installed small security cameras, invisible to the naked eye, that transmitted directly to his cell phone. He wasn't proud of that invasion of privacy, but he needed to know the truth. He needed to confirm if what he had seen that night wasn't just his desperate imagination. On the third night of surveillance, he caught Matthew getting out of bed alone, taking a few shaky steps to the window and returning. In Luke's room, the same pattern repeated, brief movements, as if testing the limits of his own body, always followed by a quick return to the safety of the bed. Gabriel, the most daring, even walked around the entire room, stopping only when he heard a noise in the hallway. Robert watched those scenes with a mixture of shock, joy, and anger. His children could walk. His children, who for almost a year had received intensive treatments, who had undergone painful examinations, who lived confined to wheelchairs, his children could walk. The joy of discovery soon gave way to a painful confusion. Why would they pretend? What could be so terrible as to make them prefer to live in that elaborate lie? The next day he cancelled all appointments and spent the entire morning reviewing the medical reports. He was looking for something he had missed, some indication that the damage was not as severe as he had been told. But all confirmed the same: spinal cord injuries consistent with partial paralysis. The medical team that had followed the boys was renowned, with specialists from all over the country. How could they all be wrong? Unless... The idea that arose in his mind was too disturbing to be considered. But once planted, he couldn't shake it. In the afternoon, he called Sonny for a private conversation in his office. "I'm seeing things on the cameras," he said bluntly. "The three of them walk when they think no one is looking." Sonny didn't seem surprised. "I know. How is that possible? The exams show real injuries." The girl hesitated, as if carefully weighing her words. "Sometimes the body truly hurts because of something the mind decides, and sometimes the mind can heal what seemed permanent. Are you saying the injuries were psychosomatic? I don't know those difficult words. I just know that the body and mind are more connected than doctors think. My grandmother healed many people in the Hollows, just with herbs and conversations. She said most illnesses start in the soul." Robert ran a hand through his hair, trying to process that possibility. Could it be viable that the psychological trauma of the accident had manifested real physical symptoms? That the belief in paralysis was so strong that it created its own evidence in the exams? Why would they do that? Why would they choose to live like this? Sonny sighed, suddenly seeming older than her 12 years. "I think it's time to talk to them directly, but not as someone who accuses, as someone who wants to understand." "Do you think they'll tell the truth?" "I don't know, but they are carrying a very heavy burden, and our meditations are helping to release that burden." "What kind of meditations are these exactly?" "Just exercises to open the heart, to feel that it's safe to tell the truth." That night, after dinner, Robert asked to talk to his 3 sons in the library. It was a room rarely used since the accident, but it had always been a special space for the family. Eleanor loved to read there, and before the tragedy, they used to spend Sunday evenings doing shared readings. Sonny stayed in the living room, giving them privacy. Mrs. Jenkins had already retired to her room. "I want to talk about something important," Robert began, sitting opposite the 3, who remained in their wheelchairs. "And I want you to know that no matter what you say, I will love you just the same. Always." The boys exchanged apprehensive glances. Gabriel, as usual, took the lead. "Did something happen, Dad?" Robert took a deep breath, searching for the right words. "I've been seeing things that make me question what really happened to you, and what's happening now." The silence that followed was heavy with tension. "What things?" Matthew asked, his voice almost inaudible. "You walking when you think no one is watching." The shock on the faces of the 3 was genuine. Luke began to cry silently. Matthew paled. Gabriel, always the most controlled, tried to maintain composure, but his lower lip trembled. "Is it true?" Robert insisted, keeping his voice soft. "Can you walk?" None of them answered directly. Instead, Gabriel asked a question. "Will you be angry with us?" Robert's heart broke at those words. The fear in his son's voice was palpable. "No, son. I would never be angry for you getting better. It's all I want in the world." "We're not getting better," Luke said between tears. "We were never sick the way everyone thinks." Robert felt the ground disappear beneath his feet. "What does that mean exactly?" It was Matthew who answered, his voice so low that Robert had to lean in to hear. "We pretended from the beginning." The confession hung in the air like a bomb. Robert looked at his children as if he had never seen them before. Shock gave way to confusion and then to disbelief. How? The exams? The doctors? "We don't know how," Gabriel admitted. "We just know it worked." "But why?" The question came out almost as a shout, making the three flinch. Robert immediately moderated his tone. "Why would you do something like this? Go through painful treatments, live confined, give up everything you liked?" "Because we had to," Gabriel replied, now with tears in his eyes too. "It was the only way." "The only way for what?" The three looked at each other again, that silent communication again in action. It was Luke who gathered courage. "To protect you, Dad." That made no sense. Protect him? How could submitting to such a cruel charade protect him from anything? "Protect me from what?" "From the truth," Matthew said. "About the accident." Robert felt a shiver run down his spine. The accident? That afternoon at the beach house, when he found the three unconscious in the pool. The despair, the first aid, the ambulance, the helicopter to the hospital in Charleston, the devastating diagnosis, life turning upside down. What truth about the accident? Again, that knowing glance among the three. "We don't want to talk about it now," Gabriel said with sudden firmness. "We're tired." Robert felt frustration growing, but he knew that pressing them at that moment would only make things worse. "All right, but we'll continue this conversation tomorrow, and I want the whole truth, understood? Whatever it is." The boys nodded, clearly relieved by the postponement. When he left the library, he found Sunny waiting in the hallway. The expression on her face said she knew exactly what had happened. "They spoke," she stated, "partially. They admitted they can walk, that they've been faking from the beginning, but they didn't explain why. They'll explain when they're ready, when they're sure it's safe." "Safe for whom?" "They said they were protecting me, which makes no sense at all." Sunny looked at him with that disconcerting intensity. "It makes sense if what they're hiding is something that could destroy you." Robert spent the night wide awake, turning those words over in his mind. What could be so terrible that his children would prefer to live an elaborate lie rather than reveal it to him? The accident had been a tragedy, yes, but an accident. After all, they had been playing unsupervised, something Robert had never forgiven himself for. They jumped into the pool, drowned, were rescued with severe injuries. A tragic sequence, but without mysteries. Or was there something more? In the morning, Mrs. Jenkins woke him with an urgent call. "Mr. Miller, your brother is here, with the police and a social worker." Robert's heart pounded. He dressed quickly and went downstairs to find Arthur in the living room, accompanied by 2 police officers and a woman in a suit who introduced herself as Dr. Elizabeth Hayes from Child Protective Services. "What does this mean?" he asked, trying to remain calm. Arthur stepped forward, extending an official paper. "This, brother, is an institutional placement order for the minor Sunny, an irregular resident in this house." "What? I contacted Child Protective Services yesterday. I explained the situation." "You explained your version," Arthur corrected, "but you omitted important details, such as the fact that the minor is performing alternative treatments with your children without any medical supervision." Robert felt his blood run cold. "How do you know that?" "I have my means. The important thing is that you are putting your children at risk, harboring a stranger who pretends to be some kind of healer." "That's ridiculous. She's just a child." "A child who appeared out of nowhere, without documents, without verifiable history, and who in less than a week has full access to your children, your home, and your life. Arthur turned to the social worker. My brother is fragile due to the tragedy we experienced. He is not thinking clearly. Dr. Elizabeth intervened with a professional voice. Mr. Miller, we are not accusing anyone of bad faith. We are simply following protocol. The minor needs to be placed in an appropriate institution while we verify her family and legal situation. She stays, Robert said with surprising firmness. If you want to follow protocols, fine. I will file for adoption or temporary custody, hire lawyers, do whatever is necessary, but she is not leaving this house today. The determination in Robert's voice surprised everyone, including himself. He knew he was acting irrationally in the eyes of others, but he was absolutely certain that Sonny was the key to unraveling the mystery surrounding his children, and that Arthur, for some reason, wanted to prevent this at all costs. The tension was broken by Sonny's arrival, accompanied by the three boys. To everyone's shock, the boys were not in their wheelchairs. They were walking, albeit with some difficulty, leaning on each other. My God, the social worker whispered. Arthur looked as if he had seen a ghost. The police officers exchanged confused glances. Robert, meanwhile, felt a wave of emotion that almost brought him to his knees. His children were walking, in public, for the first time in almost a year. We don't want to lie anymore, Gabriel said, his voice trembling but determined. We're tired of pretending. What is he talking about? Asked one of the police officers. We pretended we couldn't walk since the accident, Gabriel continued, because we were scared. Scared of what, dear? The social worker asked, approaching carefully. The three looked directly at Arthur before Luke replied. Of him. The silence that followed that accusation was so dense, it seemed possible to cut it with a knife. Robert felt the world spin around him, unable to process what he had just heard. Arthur, on the other hand, recovered quickly, forcing a laugh that sounded false even to those who didn't know him well. This is absurd. They are clearly confused, manipulated. By this girl. Arthur pointed at Sonny, who remained serene beside the boys. She's putting ideas in their heads. It's obvious this is some kind of scam. The social worker, however, kept her gaze fixed on the three children who were now balancing on their feet before everyone. Boys, she said in a professional but gentle voice, can you explain better? Why would you be afraid of your uncle? Gabriel, as always the most articulate of the three, stepped forward, still holding Matthew's hand for support. On the day of the accident, he was there, he began, his voice trembling slightly. Everyone thinks we were alone, but we weren't. That's a lie, Arthur bellowed, his face now red with rage. They were alone in the pool. I only arrived later, after it had already happened. No, Luke intervened, surprising everyone with his firmness. You were fighting with Aunt Eleanor on the porch. You didn't see us in the pool. Robert felt his stomach churn. Eleanor? What did his ex-wife have to do with this? We heard everything, Matthew continued, his eyes fixed on the floor as if still fearing direct confrontation. Uncle Arthur was saying he was going to tell Dad everything if she didn't sign some papers. Tell what? Robert finally found his voice, the question coming out almost as a whisper. The three boys exchanged glances, that silent code in action again. It was Gabriel who answered. That they were together, Mom and Uncle, for a long time. Robert's world completely crumbled. His wife and his brother. An affair. The most painful betrayal imaginable, coming from the two people he trusted most. Are you understanding now? Sonny asked, looking directly at Robert. That's why they pretended, to protect you from the truth. Arthur lunged forward, furious. Enough of this nonsense. This is defamation. I'll sue everyone in this room if this conversation continues. One of the police officers held his arm, restraining him. Calm down, sir. Dr. Elizabeth, realizing the gravity of the situation, turned again to the boys. Can you tell us exactly what happened that day? How did all this begin? The three looked at each other again. Matthew nodded to his brothers as if giving permission for the story to be told. Gabriel took a deep breath before beginning. We were playing in the pool. We were supposed to be with the nanny, but she had gone to get our snacks from the kitchen. Then we heard loud voices coming from the porch. It was Uncle Arthur and Mom. They were yelling, Luke continued. Mom said it was over, that she was going to tell Dad everything. Uncle Arthur got very angry. He held her arm tightly, Matthew added. He said if she did that, he would take everything from Dad. The company, the money, everything. We got very scared, Gabriel resumed. We got out of the pool to go over there, to ask them to stop fighting. But the deck was wet. Luke slipped first, hit his head on the edge of the pool. When Matthew and I went to help, we also fell. I didn't pass out completely, Luke said, now with tears in his eyes. I pretended. I heard them run over, Mum screaming, Uncle Arthur telling her to calm down, that no one could know they were together there. Robert felt as if he were living a nightmare. Every word from his children was like a stab. When the ambulance arrived, Gabriel continued, we had already agreed not to say anything. We were afraid of what Uncle could do. Dad. He always said the company was more his than Dad's, that without him we would be nothing. But we didn't know what to say about how we all fell into the pool together, Matthew explained. So Luke had the idea of pretending we couldn't walk. That way no one would ask too many questions about the accident. At the hospital, when the doctors said we had spinal injuries, we thought it was a sign, Luke completed, that we should continue with the plan. And when Mom left soon after, we were sure we needed to protect Dad. Robert could no longer hold back his tears. The immense sacrifice his children had made, the pain they had endured, all to protect him from a truth that, ironically, now seemed far less important than their suffering. Why didn't you tell me? He asked, his voice choked. I would have understood. I would have protected you. You were already suffering so much, Dad, Gabriel replied. After Mom left, you kept looking at us with such sadness. We didn't want to give you another reason to be sad. Arthur, who had been watching the scene with a mixture of rage and panic, tried once more to reverse the situation. This is utter nonsense. They're making all this up. They probably rehearsed this story with that girl. He pointed again at Sonny. She's manipulating all of you. Don't you see it? Sonny, who until then had remained silent, stepped forward. Mr. Arthur, I didn't know this story until now. I just knew there was a secret too heavy for them to carry. Lie, he shouted, trying to break free from the police officer. You're a fraud. You're probably not even an orphan. My parents died in the Hollows community fire almost a year. Ergo, she replied calmly. You can check the civil defense records. Mary Ann Smith and John Paul Smith, we lived in shanty number 17. The social worker made a quick note. We will verify that immediately. Robert, still trying to absorb everything he had just heard, knelt before his children. Forgive me, he said, his voice choked. Forgive me for not realizing what was happening, for not being there to protect you. It wasn't your fault, Dad, Gabriel replied, hugging him tightly. The other two joined the embrace, creating a knot of emotions so intense that even the police officers seemed moved. Dr. Elizabeth cleared her throat, composing herself. Well, considering the circumstances, I believe we need to take some urgent measures. First, these boys need immediate medical evaluation to verify their actual condition. Second, we need to formalize the situation of the minor, Sonny. She turned to Arthur. And as for you, I believe there are serious accusations here that will need to be investigated. This is a conspiracy, Arthur protested. My brother has gone crazy, don't you see? He's being manipulated by a street girl, and now he's turning his own children against me. Robert stood up, facing his brother for the first time since the revelation began. You and Eleanor, he said, his voice low but laden with contained rage. For how long? Arthur held his gaze for a moment, but soon looked away. I won't discuss this in front of police officers without my lawyer present. You don't have to. The boys have already said enough. Robert turned to the police officers. I want to file a formal complaint against my brother for threats and, I don't know, anything related to the trauma caused to my children. We will take your statement at the precinct, sir, one of the police officers replied. But now I believe the most urgent thing is to take care of the children. In the days that followed, the Miller mansion transformed into a hub of intense activity. The boys underwent a battery of tests that confirmed what they already knew. Their spinal cord injuries, though real, were not severe enough to cause permanent paralysis. The revised diagnosis indicated that the condition had a strong psychosomatic component, aggravated by emotional trauma. Sunny's story was also confirmed. The Smiths had indeed perished in the fire that devastated part of the Hollows community the previous year. The girl had been under the intermittent care of her aunt, Martha Smith, a woman with alcoholism problems who admitted she was unable to adequately care for her niece. As for Arthur, the situation became more complicated. Although the boy's accusations were serious, there was no concrete evidence of a crime. The suspicion of an affair with Eleanor, however painful for Robert, did not constitute an illegality. The threats, on the other hand, would need further investigation. On a rainy afternoon, while the boys were undergoing real physical therapy, now focused on full recovery of the movements they had suppressed for so long, Robert received an unexpected visit. Eleanor was at the door, drenched by the rain, with an expression that mixed regret and determination. "May I come in?" she asked, her voice trembling. Robert hesitated. Part of him wanted to throw her out, to scream, to unleash all the anger accumulated since he had learned of the betrayal. Another part, however, knew that the children would eventually ask about her, and that for their sake, he needed to maintain some kind of civility. "5 minutes," he said, stepping aside to let her in. Eleanor sat, in the living room, her hands restless in her lap. She was thinner, with deep dark circles under her eyes. Her time in the Appalachian Mountains had clearly not done her as much good as she had hoped. "I heard what happened," she began, "about the boys, that they can walk. How did you know?" "Arthur called me. He was furious, saying you had gone crazy, that you brought a stranger home, and that she was putting ideas into the boys' heads." She paused. "But I know our children, Robert. I know when they're lying and when they're telling the truth. And if they said they can walk, it's because they can. They said more than that," Robert retorted, keeping his voice low so as not to be heard upstairs. "They talked about you and Arthur, about what they heard on the day of the accident." Eleanor's face paled even further. "So you know. I know you betrayed not only me, but your own children, that you left them alone to deal with immense trauma, while you fled to find your balance." The bitterness in his voice was evident. Eleanor let out a suppressed sob. "I never intended for things to end this way. What I had with Arthur, it started as something stupid, a mistake at a company party after an argument we had. I tried to end it several times, but he always threatened to tell everything, to destroy our family. And on the day of the accident, I had finally gathered the courage. I said I was going to tell you everything, that I couldn't bear the lie anymore. He got furious, started screaming, grabbed my arm." She shuddered at the memory. "That's when we heard the sound of the fall, when we got to the pool. The boys were there, Luke with his head bleeding. And you didn't realize they were faking. Their own mother always said she had a sixth sense for knowing when her grandchildren were lying." "I wanted to believe," Eleanor admitted, tears now flowing freely. "It was so much easier to accept that tragedy than to admit it was all my fault, my cowardice. And then you just left? You abandoned your children when they needed you most." I couldn't look at them without feeling monstrous. Every physical therapy session, every painful exam, every tear they shed, all because of me. She wiped her tears with the back of her hand. "I thought it would be better for them if I wasn't around, constantly reminding them of what had happened. It was selfish, I know, but at the time it seemed like the only way out." Robert looked at the woman he had once loved deeply and felt nothing but immense sadness, not just for himself, but for the children who had suffered so much. "What do you want, Eleanor? Why are you here now?" "I want to see my children. I want to ask their forgiveness and—" She hesitated. "I want to testify against Arthur if necessary. I have proof of the threats he made, emails, messages. I know it doesn't erase what I did, but maybe it will help protect you and the boys now." Before Robert could answer, a movement on the stairs caught his attention. Sunny was there, watching in silence. Beside her, the 3 boys, now walking more steadily, leaning only lightly on the handrail. "Mom?" Luke called, the most sentimental of the 3. Eleanor turned, bringing her hands to her mouth as she saw her son standing, coming down the stairs. My boys, she whispered, tears, now uncontrollable. You're walking. We're getting stronger every day, Matthew said with a small smile. Eleanor took a hesitant step towards them, but stopped, unsure if she would be welcome. I'm so sorry. For everything. It was Gabriel who responded, with a maturity that again surprised Robert. We miss you too, Mom. Your absence especially. The encounter was emotionally charged. The boys, despite everything, still loved their mother and missed her. Eleanor, in turn, oscillated between tears of joy at seeing them recovered and guilt remembering her role in all that suffering. Sunny remained at a distance, observing with those eyes too wise for her age. At one point, Eleanor addressed her. You must be Sunny, the boys told me about you. They did? Robert asked, surprised. Yes, they called me yesterday. Said they had a special friend who was helping them clean the house's energy. Sunny smiled shyly. I'm just doing what my grandmother taught me, bringing light to dark places. Well, then I owe you a thank you for helping my children when I couldn't. You can also help them now, Sunny replied. They need the whole family together to heal completely. Robert watched that scene with conflicting feelings. He couldn't imagine a future where he and Eleanor could rebuild what they had before. The betrayal with his own brother was too deep a wound. But perhaps, for the sake of the children, they could establish some kind of peaceful coexistence. That night, after Eleanor left with the promise to return the next day for a longer conversation with the boys, Robert found Sunny sitting on the porch, looking at the stars. You knew she would come, didn't you? He asked, sitting beside the girl. Sunny shrugged. I felt someone important was coming. Someone who was part of the healing. Do you really have this gift of feeling things? Everyone has it, but most people forget how to use it. My grandmother used to say that children and the elderly are the ones who remember most, because they are closer to the other side. What other side? Where we come from and where we go. Sunny smiled at Robert's confused expression. You don't need to understand everything now. You just need to trust your heart, as you did when you brought me here. Robert nodded thoughtfully. And now? What happens? Now the truth is being revealed. The wounds can truly begin to heal, not just on the outside. And what about you? Child Protective Services said they would try to locate other relatives of yours. Sunny's smile diminished a little. I only have Aunt Martha, but she can't even take care of herself. What if you stayed here with me and the boys? The girl's eyes lit up. Would that be possible? Well, we would have to go through the legal process, but I can apply for temporary custody in the meantime. You saved my children, Sunny. You brought light to this house when it was plunged into shadows. The least I can do is offer you a home. Sunny didn't respond with words. Instead, she stood up and hugged Robert tightly, as if she could finally stop being the wise and mature girl and just be a child who found her place in the world. In the days that followed, the Miller mansion underwent a remarkable transformation. The heavy curtains that blocked the sun were replaced by lighter ones. The wheelchairs were donated to a charity. The hospital-like medical equipment gave way to more welcoming spaces. It was as if the whole house was breathing again. The boys progressed rapidly in physical therapy now that they no longer consciously suppressed their movements. Doctors were impressed by the speed of recovery, attributing it to the extraordinary resilience of the young body and the powerful connection between mind and nervous system. Eleanor, keeping her promise, began to visit her sons regularly. Gradually, an amicable relationship developed between her and Robert. Not a return to romance, which both knew was impossible, but a partnership focused on the children's well-being. On one of these visits, she brought surprising news. I received an email from Arthur, she said, when they were alone in the library. Robert felt his body tense. What did he want? To ask for forgiveness, believe it or not. She handed him a printed sheet. I had it printed for you to read. The letter was long and confused, alternating between apologies, justifications, and some veiled accusations. But amidst the emotional chaos, there was a tone of genuine regret that surprised Robert. He seems broken, he commented, returning the paper. He is. He lost everything. Money, reputation, family, even his self-esteem, which was always his most precious asset. Eleanor sighed. I'm not defending him. Believe me, just observing that sometimes we need to lose everything to see what really matters. Robert nodded thoughtfully. Are you going to respond? I already have. I said I forgive him, but I will never forget. And I hope he finds peace far from here. Eleanor's maturity in dealing with the situation impressed Robert. Perhaps the distance and recent events had transformed her as much as they had him. And you, she asked, can you forgive him someday? Robert reflected for a long time before answering. I don't know. Maybe with time. What he did to the company. To our parents, to you, there are many layers of betrayal. But carrying that hatred doesn't do me any good either. Nor the children, Eleanor added. They feel everything, you know, even when we think we're hiding it. I learned that the hard way, Robert replied with a sad smile. At that moment, Sunny appeared at the library door, as if she had been summoned by the conversation. Sorry to interrupt, she said shyly. It's okay, dear. We're done here, Eleanor assured, standing up. I'll go see how the boys are doing. When they were alone, Sunny approached Robert. You're thinking about your brother, she said, not as a question but as a statement. How do you... Robert shook his head, already accustomed to her supernatural perception. Yes, I am. Eleanor received an email from him. He's suffering a lot, Sunny said, but it's a necessary suffering, like a fever that comes to heal. Can you feel that even with him being far away? Some connections are stronger than distance. You are brothers. You came from the same origin. Robert pondered those words. Do you think I should forgive him? It's not my decision to make, Sunny replied wisely. But I know that forgiving doesn't mean forgetting or allowing the person to do harm again. Sometimes forgiving is more for our peace than for theirs. It was incredible how that 12-year-old girl could articulate concepts that many adults would never comprehend. You are an extraordinary person, you know, Sunny smiled, and for an instant she seemed just a child receiving a compliment. I'm just repeating what my grandmother used to say. She was extraordinary. She would be very proud of you now. Sunny's eyes shone with contained tears. Do you really think so? I'm sure of it. You brought light to an entire family that was lost in darkness. I can't imagine a greater gift than that. Sunny discreetly wiped away a tear that had escaped. Thank you for giving me a home, Mr. Miller, for believing in me when no one else did. Thank you for saving us, he replied, hugging her with a paternal affection that grew every day. Robert felt a tightness in his chest. It was the first time the boys had mentioned that detail. In the confusion of the moment, had Arthur really delayed acting? Could that have worsened his children's condition? Do you think he hesitated to help? The three nodded in unison. We heard him tell Mom, wait, we need to think about what we're going to say, Matthew explained. Only after that did they run to the pool. That's when we decided to pretend, Luke added, because we realized he was more worried about hiding the secret than about helping us. Robert closed his eyes, trying to contain the rising anger. Those seconds of Arthur's hesitation, that moment when he chose to protect himself instead of immediately helping his nephews, had changed the course of their lives forever. I think, Sunny said, who had only been listening intently until then, that your uncle is already suffering his own punishment, carrying the weight of what he did. Everyone turned to her, interested in her perspective. What do you mean? Robert asked. He lost everything he valued. Money, power, family. He's alone in a foreign country on the run. Isn't that a worse punishment than any prison? Robert pondered those words. There was wisdom in Sunny's observation, a perspective that went beyond simple punishment. So you think we should let him escape? Gabriel asked, confused. I didn't say that, Sunny replied calmly. I think he needs to make amends for what he did, return the money, admit his mistakes. But maybe he doesn't need to spend years in jail to learn the lesson he's already learning now. Robert watched, fascinated, as his children seriously considered Sunny's words. It was incredible how that girl, with her intuitive wisdom, could offer perspectives that adults with decades of experience often failed to see. What if, Matthew began thoughtfully, what if we proposed a deal? He returns the money, confesses what he did, but in return he can serve his sentence in a different way. What kind of sentence? Robert questioned, intrigued by the suggestion. Like community service, or helping people who suffered accidents like ours with money for treatment? The idea, coming from a 9-year-old child, impressed Robert. It was a solution that contemplated justice and reparation without being limited to traditional punishment. I can think about that, he promised. Talk to the lawyers, see what's legally possible. The discussion continued for some time, each of the boys expressing their concerns and hopes about the situation. In the end, there was no definitive conclusion, but a shared feeling that whatever the outcome, it should allow everyone to move forward without carrying the weight of the past. Later, when the boys were already in bed, Robert found Sunny on the porch, looking at the stars as she often did. "Thank you," he said, sitting beside her, "for helping the boys see beyond anger." Sunny smiled. They already knew the way. They just needed someone to show them it wasn't crazy to think differently. "Do you really believe Arthur is already suffering his own punishment?" "I do. When we lose everything that defines us, we are forced to face who we really are. For some, that is hell on earth." Robert reflected on those words. It was true. Arthur had always defined his worth by status, power, material achievements. Without that, what would remain? Perhaps a broken man, forced to recognize the superficiality of everything he had valued in life. "You know," Sunny continued, "my grandmother used to say that justice without compassion is just revenge disguised, and that revenge is a poison we drink, hoping the other person dies." Robert couldn't help but laugh at the wisdom contained in that saying. "Your grandmother was a wise woman." "She was. She taught me that forgiving isn't for the other person, it's for ourselves. To be able to sleep peacefully at night." "And can you forgive whoever took your parents from you?" The question escaped before he could contain it. It was something he had always wondered, how someone so young could deal with such a devastating loss without becoming bitter. Sunny was silent for a moment, her gaze lost in the stars. "It was an accident," she finally said. "The fire started in Mr. George's shanty, who had mental problems. He forgot the stove on and fell asleep. There was no malice in it," she sighed. "For a while, I was angry, very angry. But then I realized it was only harming me, taking away what I had left of my parents. Happy memories." Robert felt his eyes well up at the depth of those words. How could a 12-year-old child have such clarity about life, when so many adults spent decades without achieving it? "You have an old soul, Sunny." She smiled, becoming just a girl for an instant. "Grandma used to say that too, that I had lived many lives before this one." In the following days, Robert initiated a series of consultations with his lawyers to explore the possibility of a settlement with Arthur. The idea initially suggested by Matthew took shape. In exchange for confessing his crimes and fully returning the embezzled funds, Arthur could receive an alternative sentence that included community service and funding for treatments for children who suffered accidents similar to the triplets. The proposal, though unusual, found support in recent legislation that encouraged restorative justice in cases of non-violent financial crimes. The judge assigned to the case, known for his progressive views, showed interest in the approach, especially considering the family component of the case and the potential positive impact on society. The most difficult part remained, presenting the proposal to Arthur and verifying if he would be willing to accept it. On a Thursday afternoon, while Robert worked in his home office, a change of habit he had adopted to be more present in his children's lives, he received an unexpected call. It was Arthur speaking from a public phone in Cancun. "Robert," his brother's voice sounded tired, aged. "I know you must hate me now." Robert felt a whirlwind of emotions, anger, hurt, pity, and a strange kind of relief at finally hearing his brother's voice. "I don't hate you, Arthur. I just want to understand why. Why betray my trust in this way? Why Eleanor? Why risk everything we built together?" A long sigh from the other end of the line. "I don't have simple answers. Maybe envy. Maybe the feeling that I always stayed in your shadow, even being the older brother. You were the genius, the visionary. I was just the administrator, the numbers guy." A pause. When I started with Eleanor, it was like I finally had something that was just mine, something you didn't have. The raw honesty of the confession caught Robert by surprise. And then, when you realized the damage you were causing, then it was too late. I was addicted to the adrenaline, to the secret. And then came the accident. Arthur's voice faltered. I never meant to hurt the boys, Robert. You have to believe that. But you hesitated to help them. You prioritized hiding your affair with Eleanor. Silence on the other end, broken only by a muffled sob. It was only a few seconds, but I carry that on my conscience every day. They could have, if it had been worse and Arthur couldn't complete the sentence. When I found out they were faking that they could walk, it was like the world collapsed completely. Everything I did, all the harm I caused, and for what? Robert took a deep breath, trying to organize his thoughts. I'm proposing a deal, Arthur, a chance to repair at least part of the damage you caused. He explained the terms of the proposal, the full return of the funds, the confession, the alternative sentence focused on helping children with injuries similar to those the triplets pretended to have. Why would you do that for me? Arthur asked when Robert finished explaining. After everything I've done? I'm not doing it for you, I'm doing it for my children, who need to learn that justice isn't just punishment. I'm doing it for myself, to be able to move forward without the weight of hatred. And I'm doing it for our company, for the employees who depend on it. Arthur was silent for a long moment. I'll think about it, he finally said. And thank you, Robert. I know I don't deserve your mercy. It's not mercy, Robert corrected. It's pragmatism, and perhaps a little wisdom I learned from a 12-year-old girl. After hanging up the phone, Robert remained motionless in his chair, processing the conversation. He hadn't expected to feel so emotionally drained, nor so relieved to have finally confronted his brother. As he turned, he saw Sonny standing at the office door, observing him with those deep eyes that seemed to see beyond appearances. You talked to him, she stated. Robert was no longer surprised by the girl's perception. I did. I offered the deal we discussed. And he'll accept. He said he'll think about it. But I think so. He seems broken. Sonny nodded, understanding. Sometimes we need to break to rebuild something better. The words hung in the air, laden with meaning. In a way, everyone in that house had been broken by the events of the last year, by the lies, by the fear. And in some mysterious way, this breaking allowed for a more authentic, more solid reconstruction. The following week, Arthur contacted them again, this time through his lawyer. He accepted the terms of the agreement and pledged to return voluntarily to the United States to fulfill them. The news was met with a mixture of relief and apprehension by the family. The boys, though still cautious about their uncle, seemed satisfied with the solution found. Will he really help other children? Luke asked during dinner after Robert shared the news. He'll have to help, Matthew replied. It's part of the agreement, isn't it, Dad? Yes, and he will be closely monitored to ensure he complies with everything correctly. And will we have to see him? Gabriel asked, concern evident in his voice. Only if you want to, Robert assured. I'll never force you to do anything, especially after everything you've been through. The three seemed relieved by the answer. Sonny, who had been listening to the conversation in silence, finally spoke. Sometimes facing what scares us is the only way to overcome fear. The boys looked at her, considering her words. It was incredible how much they respected her, how seriously they considered every observation she made, however challenging. Maybe someday, Gabriel conceded, when we're ready. Arthur's return to the United States occurred without much fanfare, despite the press's interest in the case. Following the advice of the lawyers and the company's public relations team, Robert issued only a brief statement, informing that his brother was cooperating fully with the authorities and that details of the legal agreement would be released at the appropriate time. The reunion between the brothers took place in the judge's chambers, a neutral and controlled environment. Arthur seemed to have aged a decade in a few months, thinner, with deep dark circles under his eyes and visibly graying hair. When he saw Robert, his eyes filled with contained tears. "Thank you," he said simply, "for this chance." Robert nodded, still unable to express complete forgiveness, but acknowledging the first step towards some kind of reconciliation. The hearing proceeded as planned. Arthur formally confessed his crimes, returned the embezzled funds, and accepted the conditions of the alternative sentence. 5 years of community service, dedicating at least 30 hours a week to a newly created foundation for children who suffered physical and emotional trauma. In addition, he would be prohibited from holding executive positions in any company during that period. At the end of the hearing, as everyone prepared to leave, Arthur approached Robert once more. "I heard about the girl," he said hesitantly. "The one living with you. They say she's the one who helped the boys to recover." "Sunny," Robert confirmed. "And yes, without her, we might never have discovered the truth. I'd like to meet her someday, thank her personally." Robert considered the request. "When the time is right. She's part of the family now, and we protect each other." The message was clear. Arthur would need to prove, with time and actions, that he deserved any rapprochement. In the following weeks, life at the Miller mansion continued its course of normalization and healing. The boys, increasingly confident in their movements, began to play regular sports at school. Sunny, now officially under Robert's temporary custody while the adoption process proceeded, flourished academically and socially. Eleanor's regular visits became an anticipated event for the children, who gradually rebuilt trust in their mother. The New Steps Foundation, created as part of the agreement with Arthur, began to take shape. Surprisingly, he demonstrated genuine commitment to the project, dedicating himself far beyond the required hours. His administrative and financial knowledge, once used to embezzle funds, now served to maximize the institution's efficiency and ensure that every penny was well spent. On a warm summer afternoon, about 6 months after the revelation that changed their lives, Robert hosted a barbecue in the mansion's garden. It was a triple celebration. The boy's 10th birthday, the official finalization of Sunny's adoption process, and the inauguration of the first headquarters of the New Steps Foundation. The house was filled with guests, the boys' school friends, Robert's colleagues from the company, Eleanor and her parents, Sunny's Aunt Martha, now sober for 5 months, even some older employees like Mrs. Jenkins and the gardener, Mr. Anthony. The most notable absence was Arthur, who had not yet been invited to family events, a decision respected by him without question. During the party, while the children played in the pool and the adults chatted animatedly, in small groups, Robert observed everything with a sense of fulfillment he hadn't experienced in years. It was incredible how life could change in such a short time. Just over 6 months ago, his home was a place of silence and pain, his children prisoners of a lie created out of love for him, his company on the verge of collapse due to his own brother's manipulations. Now, everything was different. The mansion, once cold and sterile like a hospital, overflowed with life. The company, restructured after Arthur's departure, had adopted a new management philosophy more balanced between profit and social responsibility. And his family, well, his family had grown in ways he could never imagine. "What are you thinking about?" Sunny asked, approaching silently as was her custom. Robert smiled at the girl who now, legally, was his daughter. "About how everything changed since you came into our lives." Sunny looked at her adopted brothers playing in the pool, at Eleanor chatting amicably with Mrs. Jenkins, at Aunt Martha timidly socializing with other guests. "It changed for the better," she stated, "without a doubt. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I hadn't stopped the car that day, if I had ignored you as I was about to do." Sunny smiled, that enigmatic smile she always had when she knew something others didn't fully comprehend. "I would have tried again, and again, until I got your attention." "What do you mean?" "Some people are meant to meet, Mr. Miller, no matter how many detours they take on the way." Before he could question further, Sunny was called by the boys to help settle a dispute over the rules of some water game. Robert watched her walk away, once again impressed by the wisdom emanating from that small person, whom destiny, or whatever mysterious force Sunny believed in, had placed in his path. The party continued lively until dusk, when guests began to leave. Eleanor, who had stayed until the end to help with gifts and organization, was about to leave when Robert called her for a private conversation in the library. "I wanted to thank you," he said when they were alone, "for everything you've done for the boys in recent months, and for your support in Sonny's adoption." Eleanor smiled, a genuine smile he hadn't seen on her face in a long time. "They are my children too, and Sonny, well, she brought light to all of us, didn't she? Her name couldn't be more appropriate." "True." Robert hesitated before continuing. "I've been thinking a lot about forgiveness lately, about how difficult, but necessary, it is." "Because of Arthur?" "Yes, in part, but also for us, for what happened between us." Eleanor lowered her eyes, guilt still evident in her expression. "Robert, what I did—" "It's in the past," he interrupted gently, "and it needs to stay there so that we can all move forward, including you." Silent tears began to stream down Eleanor's face. "I don't know if I'll ever forgive myself for the suffering I caused. You'll have to try, for the boys' sake. They need a whole mother, not someone carrying guilt for the rest of their life." Eleanor nodded, wiping her tears. "You've become a wise man, Robert Miller. I've been learning from my children, all 4 of them." The inclusion of Sonny in that count made Eleanor smile again. She really is special, unlike any child I've ever met. Sometimes I think she's not a child, you know, that she's some kind of angel or ancient being in human form. Bear laughed at his own comment. "I know it sounds crazy. It doesn't, I feel it too, as if she was sent exactly when we needed her, with the exact wisdom we needed to hear." They said goodbye with a friendly hug, no longer husband and wife, but partners on a shared journey of parenthood and reconstruction. Later, when the house finally quieted and the children were in bed, Robert sat on the porch with a glass of wine, contemplating the starry sky of Charleston, South Carolina. The sea breeze carried the familiar scent of salt, a constant reminder of the beauty and also the dangers the sea could offer, just like life. "May I join you?" Sonny asked, appearing at the porch door in her star-print pajamas. "Of course. Shouldn't you be sleeping?" "I was waiting for everyone to go to bed. I wanted to thank you for today. It was the best birthday I've ever had." Robert smiled, moved. Although Sonny's official birthday was still 3 months away, they decided to include her in the triplets celebration, creating a new family tradition. "I'm glad you liked it. You deserve this and much more, Sonny." The girl sat in the chair beside him, folding her legs under her body. "You know, when I lost my parents, I thought I would never have a family again, that I would be alone forever. And now? Now I have not only a family, but a mission too." She looked at Robert seriously. "To help others as I helped you. Is that what you want to do when you grow up? Help people?" "Yes, like Grandma did, healing what doctors can't see." Robert nodded, understanding. Sonny had a genuine gift for perceiving emotional pain, hidden traumas, secrets that suffocated people. And more. Importantly, she had the wisdom to help free those who were trapped in their own fears and lies. "You'll be quite a healer," he said sincerely. Sonny smiled, pleased with the recognition. "Mr. Miller?" "Yes?" "It's time." "Time for what?" "To forgive your brother, truly in your heart." Robert felt a lump in his throat. It was incredible how that girl could read his deepest thoughts, his most intimate hesitations. "I don't know if I can yet." "You can. You've already started. Just finish the process." Sonny lightly touched his arm. "Not for him, for yourself." Robert remained silent, reflecting on those simple yet powerful words. It was true that the resentment he still harbored against Arthur weighed on his heart, poisoning small moments of joy like the one they had today. "I'll try," he finally promised. Sonny smiled, apparently satisfied with the answer. "And then our story will be complete. The circle closed, ready for a new beginning." Robert looked at the small figure beside him, no longer the fragile, suspicious street girl he had met months ago, but a confident young woman, surrounded by love and possibilities. The boys had also transformed, freed from the weight of their secret, rediscovering the joy of simply being children. Even he, Robert, was a different person now, more present, more conscious, more connected with what truly mattered. "You know, Sonny," he finally said, "I think you're right. Some people really are destined to meet, and some lessons destined to be learned no matter how much we try to avoid them. Like the lesson about truth and lies? Exactly. About how lies, even well-intentioned ones, can become prisons, and how the truth, however painful it may be initially, is the only path to true freedom." Sonny nodded, wise as ever. "And about family," she added, "that it's not just who has the same blood, but who chooses to stay together even in difficult times." Robert hugged his adopted daughter, feeling a wave of gratitude for everything she had brought into their lives. The girl who had stopped his car that morning with an enigmatic phrase, "They're deceiving you," had ended up unleashing a revolution not only in his family, but in his way of seeing the world. The truth, finally, had not only freed his children from their wheelchairs, but had freed everyone from much deeper and more complex emotional prisons. And Sonny, with her intuitive wisdom and open heart, had been the key to that liberation. The next morning, Robert woke with a clarity he hadn't felt in years. After breakfast with the children, he did something he had been postponing. He called Arthur and invited him to lunch the following week. It would be the first step on a long journey of reconciliation, not only with his brother, but with parts of himself he had neglected for too long. As he watched his 4 children playing in the garden, Gabriel leading some elaborate game, Matthew calculating strategies, Luke drawing in the shadows of the trees, and Sonny connecting everyone with her luminous energy, Robert felt a deep certainty. Whatever the future held, they would face it together, strengthened by the truth that had almost destroyed them, but which had ultimately saved them. The boy's lie, created out of love and fear, had finally given way to a reality far more beautiful than any of them could have imagined. And little Sonny, the girl who had arrived from nowhere with a mysterious mission, now had a permanent place not only in that house, but in the hearts of everyone she had touched with her light.